In this fresh episode, we take a peek at some of the history of banking as a line of inquiry into cryptocurrency. In the recent video linking together pairs to Algorand, I made reference to inherent risk of a centralized exchange performing governance duties on behalf of an Algorand holder. In that, I painted a picture of Coinbase as a sophisticated money changer. In this video, I want to cover a different perspective by taking a look at the history of banking. After all, what's old is often what's new. Welcome to Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host, Poseidon, the mighty and ancient god of the sea, and whose spirit brings to life and animates me, the talking milkshake. Let's go to Google today and type in, quote, "Why do banks exist?" end quote. And when you do, you'll get the first result, and it reads, quote, "As a key component of the financial system, banks allocate funds from savers to borrowers in an efficient manner. They provide specialized financial services, which reduce the cost of obtaining information about both savings and borrowing opportunities," end quote. That's the common story, right? Banks exist so people who save money and lend that money to others. Only that's not at all quite right. If it were, then the news would be filled with stories of moonshot gains of savers standing in line at their local bank branch, putting in even more cash in hopes of making even more money. So I find the lending argument to be a little weak. Let's try this again. This time, let's ask, quote, "Why did banks form?" end quote. Because by understanding why banks formed in the first place, we can better understand what might happen with these centralized exchanges. After all, why do these banks exist in the first place? Quote, "Banking has been around since the first currencies were minted, and wealthy people wanted a safe place to store their money. Ancient empires also needed a functional financial system to facilitate trade, distribute wealth, and collect taxes. Banks were to play a major role in all of that, just as they do today," end quote. Now, this response makes way more sense to me, way more than just, quote, "Banks provide loans," end quote, which is a kind of folklore. The historical notion here is key. Banks were where the first currencies were minted, and ultimately where wealthy people wanted to store their money. But why did they want a safe place to store their money? Because storing piles of cash, or more likely real large bars or blocks of gold, is completely impractical. It's also very dangerous. Leaving the house for any reason would be extremely risky because you're trusting that no one knows you have a house full of gold. And in those ancient times, if you had a house full of gold, the bad news bandit bears would be coming. The bank then is stood up as a kind of castle vault to help ensure that wealthy citizens of a country have a convenient place to store their loot. The financial system evolved from there, but the basic three ideas are still in place. 1. Wealthy people needed a safe place to store their money. 2. Governments needed a good way to ensure economic gains were distributed according to their policy aims. 3. The banking system facilitated trade and money exchange. Okay, let's fast forward a bit and use these 3 points to explain why a centralized crypto exchange is needed from the perspective of, say, a crypto bank. In today's modern world, the storage of a cryptocurrency is done on secret passphrases. And these are a series of words that for many of us are impossible to remember. And anyone with a crypto wallet is just one wrong click away from having a really bad day. And that's nothing compared to the generational gap that's unfolding before our eyes. Surely you've also been out and watched the difficulty a segment of the population has in working a cell phone. That should serve as a good reminder that the population demographic has trouble turning on or off a cell phone camera, then knowing how to work a digital wallet is a very tall ask. Instead, what the rapid push of cryptocurrency into the economy does is create a pain point in our society. The pain point requires a cryptocurrency bank to store these passphrases and handle the security, even provide insurance guarantees that government themselves may not be ready to provide yet, such as FDIC protection. For example, and I have to apply Coinbase for this, the idea that you can have both your gas fees and a certain insurance policy applied to your holdings. I have those details on the screen and we'll link to it in the description below. Here's the most remarkable idea though. Let's say that the Project Hamilton project does come through and the central bank pushes forward a central bank digital coin. Now, how do you suppose that gets distributed? Perhaps the response is local bank branch. And here's why I say that. Banks were created to solve problems. And right now we live in this magical time where it is as if we are rediscovering why small and local bank branches exist in the first place. Consider this point. Why were banks created in medieval England? And the answer? Merchants needed a place to exchange currency from other countries. So what's old is kind of what's new again. So if you're with me so far, you might even wonder what projects best solve those use cases. Well, I cover 2 of them on the channel. First, I'd suggest you need a decentralized RPC network that's affordable that can enable a bank to store store or access value across multiple chains. For example, imagine a community bank having a series of dApps for everything from bill payment to keeping your NFT collection safe. Those days are coming. That's where I think Anchor fits in, as banks are going to need access to a cost-efficient solution at scale. Second, you need something that solves the insurance and fraud problems inherent to financial markets. Now, if you're immediately thinking Flex the Network SAMP token, then you've read my mind. Flex the Network didn't just solve a today problem, they've solved a historical problem. I don't think we exactly understand how big of a deal that really is. Third, I feel centralized exchanges are important to the future of cryptocurrency community banks, in the same way that central banks or the stock exchange are. However, I think we're going to see a separation of roles there. Coinbase today tries to be both a stockbroker and an asset holder. From a risk perspective, the financial system is going to push on them to pick one over the other. If cryptocurrencies are going to be treated as commodities, I have a hard time believing the regulators will be comfortable having a centralized exchange be all things to all people. This is all for sure speculation on the future. And you know the future is mysterious. But I do know this. This is Unusual Due Diligence. In today's fresh episode, I made a claim that cryptocurrency market is following an accelerated replay of the history of banking and finance. From that, I drew 3 conclusions about what might happen next. The more I read about the history of banking, the more I think there's connections to what's happening in the broader market. Sometimes history can be a guide. At other times, a talking milkshake can be a guide too. Make waves, my friends.